Welcome back, everybody, to Infamously Speaking. Today we have a very special guest. We have John, who's a great friend, mentor, leader, husband, father. The list of titles goes on and on. I don't want to inflate him too much because then he'll never let me live it down. But before we get into the show, a couple of things that we have to do. Of course, first and foremost, if you're listening on YouTube, make sure to hit subscribe. If you're listening on other podcast mediums, be sure to follow the show, rate, comment, like, subscribe, share Infamously Speaking with friends and family. That's how it grows and how everybody gets part of the Infamous family. Second, we have Infamously Speaking merch. I'm wearing the navy green. I'm not sure if this is navy. Definitely not. Is it navy green? I
Forest
don't really
green.
know what color.
It's forest green.
Forest green. Thanks. With the white embroidery. Get your merch. And with that being said, let me formally introduce John. So there's a reason why I wanted John on the show. And it's not just because he's a friend, someone who I think is going to bring a lot of great conversation and perspective to the show, but it's because it's somebody who I feel deeply understands what it means to grow. And on this show, that's what we talk about a lot, is intentional growth, discomfort. And the way that John does that is through empathy and curiosity, which is two things that I align myself with very much so. What are some of John's credentials? And John, check me on this if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure you spent over 20 years leading teams, transforming company cultures, building learning environments that are rooted in some of the things that we overlook, like empathy, like curiosity, and like discomfort. But beyond all of those things, and what I definitely connect with John the most is the fact that he's a husband and a father, just like myself. And we both find a lot of ourselves in those two things. We enjoy them very much. We both understand that they're some of the biggest blessings that a person could ever receive. So with that being said, John, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on. Anything that you want to say to kick us off?
I just want to know if you're afraid to say my last name and pronounce it wrong.
No, I know how to pronounce it. I don't want to put your business out there. If you want me to say it, I'll say it.
Oh,
But
okay. No, it's
I don't
fine. I
want to
can just
sell
be
it.
John. I can be John.
So,
No, and I would say like I have had a 20-year career, and while I have always liked to think that I showed up with the mentality of a leader, I wasn't always officially a leader. But leadership is how we show up. And I love that you mentioned the piece about family because that's why I do everything. And I think the way that we treat each other in the world is the most important thing.
absolutely. So I know that there was a topic we were kind of talking off camera
Yeah, we were.
about just some work stuff. And so, but
Well, yeah.
you
So
mentioned, so I wanted to
yeah,
start there.
I had to pick that conversation back up, and I think it ties into the idea of growth that you were talking about just now. Is um, when does we were talking about the scope of work and trying to get and where responsibility should live and all of that. And the way that I kind of been thinking about business in this new role that I'm in now is I'm running a business, and it doesn't matter what's part of that business, whether I've got UX designers on my team or developers or programmers, and if like there's other places in the business that have those same functions. What it really comes down to is, can I run a better business within a business than the other groups, and that's, I think, when we were working together, uh, I think I had a maybe different mentality than the rest of L&D. Is like I wanted the responsibility. I wanted to have some autonomy and control over them, because that allowed me to run a business. And I think, that's as you move through those days in corporate life, having that mentality is a real unlock. And I see that so many people limit themselves because they're like, no, this is not my scope, or it should be somewhere else or over there or whatever, but ultimately you just end up shooting yourself in the foot and making your job harder by doing that.
So let me ask you a question off of that, because I agree with you. But why do you think people limit themselves? Do you think it's because is it an ignorance thing, like they just don't know? Is it a discomfort thing? Is it a fear thing? Is it they're worried on stepping on somebody else's toes? What do you think it is?
I think it's all those things, and I often wonder like what blindness do I have to the ways that I limit myself. And I think that's why that personal connection, the way that we treat each other, is so important because uh, anytime you run into a person that's self-limiting, it's going to be a different thing. It's going to be their personal story. It's going to be about what their life experiences. And if you're ever going to help them see that and then decide if they want to change in response to that, you have to get them talking about their story and what's unique and specific to them, you know? I couldn't tell you why your boss, you know, wants to limit stuff. I wouldn't know, you know? But you gotta
Absolutely.
gotta talk.
Right. So I think you're spot on. I think one of the biggest things, and I'm just going to speak from my own personal experience. I can't speak for other people. I remember when I was still early-ish in career. I've been where I am for a little bit over 10 years. And so I didn't really start making moves to try to grow intentionally, make moves until I was about halfway through that. And the first thing that I hit, or the first obstacle I faced, was a self-imposed one of like, am I really good enough to do? Can I really do this? Like, who am I to go ahead and challenge somebody else's thought? Or who am I to bring up, this idea that just happened to work for me, whether it was pitching something a certain way because I was in sales, or a
Yeah.
tactic that I was using in a conversation where it was like I wasn't listening to respond, I was listening to actually listen. Like, who am I to say those things or to call people out for not doing those things? And I think that could be a reason why some folks kind of stay where they're at and don't want to push it, because they're like, well, who am I to say those things? These people that are above me or been here longer, they should know the same things that I'm feeling. They should have felt these things already, and there's a reason they're not saying them. What do you think about that? What do you make of that?
I think a lot about that. But what really was the motivation for you? You said like 5 years into your time, you decided to maybe branch out. Like, what was the motivating factor for that? Where were you feeling discomfort or wanting to move the needle?
Well, it was really in personal life. So I had just moved out of my parents' house, and I was like, man, I'd like to have a couple extra. I'd like to have a couple extra bucks. Life got real. Life got real. I always say you have no idea, if you have present parents, you have no idea how much they shelter you from, for better or for worse, but it's like 99% for the better, right? But you have no clue what it's like until you get out on your own. And it's from every facet. It's financially, it's emotionally, it's mentally, it's physically. And so when I first moved out, I was like, man, I would like to have a couple more bucks. So then I went full time. But then when I became full time, I had great leaders around me that were like, hey, now that you're actually here full time and it seems like you're kind of starting to think about this as a career option, let's see what we could do. Like, they were pouring knowledge and wisdom into me before, but once I made the decision, they're like, all right, like now we could really get to work. And so that
Yeah.
was that was the pivot point.
I mean, and you seem to attract that to yourself too. You know, I know, I remember when you came into my orbit, or maybe I came into your orbit. I don't know who, maybe we're just orbiting each other, but like, it was very easy to like lift you up and coach and develop you. And I don't think everybody's that way. You seem to be very exceptionally open to it.
So we just recorded an episode with the Growth and Development podcast. Shout out to our guy Chris. But we talked about how sports taught us lessons in our adolescence and how we carried them into adulthood. And I said one of the biggest things that sports taught me was the importance of feedback, and
Yeah.
how if when you don't take feedback, all you're doing really is limiting your potential. You're putting a ceiling on yourself. And it could just be something as simple as when I was playing football, my dad was my coach. So that right there made it harder to take feedback because it was my
Yeah,
dad.
sure.
What made me buy in was like, hey, listen, just try it. He was like, just adjust your stance a little bit. He's like, your stance is a little too wide, so you're getting knocked off the ball. And I was like, okay. He's like, so just narrow it up a little bit, get a little bit lower to the ground, and you'll see the difference. And it worked. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, this feedback stuff's not that half bad.
My dad
Uh,
knows something.
My dad, well, I'm not going to say that because he listens, and then he's like, I told you. No, I'm just kidding. But I truly think that's something that I learned from sports, to be honest with you, which is just be open to
Or
the feedback, because
did you learn it from your dad?
I could have learned it from my dad for sure. I'm not going to give him the credit. Come on, John, don't do
I'm gonna push you on this. I'm pushing the
that.
rest of the conversation. I'm gonna push you on this.
But yeah, I think that's where that comes from. It's just you have the opportunity to improve yourself, and really the limiter is going to be how open you are to change and being willing to receive criticism, regardless of how harsh it could be or harsh it could feel.
Yeah. So going back to what you asked me about my opinions on like new people coming into an organization or a culture or a society, and like they don't know the norms, and they're like, oh, the people above me, the people with more tenure, um, know better. So who am I to
Right.
tell them?
Right.
Uh, yeah, so I think that really plays into the parenting conversation. And I know, I had some rough moments or a lot of rough moments in my childhood, and I grew up not like believing the world belonged to me, and not in like an entitled sort of way, but more in the way of I really truly can shape the world into whatever I want it to be. And I think I didn't have that realization until, um, 15 years into my career that I was like, I actually like I can make the choices here, and I can shape this into whatever I want it to be. And but also, from a parenting perspective, I think, and I think about this a lot, like it's always in my mind, but I want to raise my children in a way that they leave the house believing that their existence and exactly how they are is a powerful force in the world, and if they decide that they want the world to be some way, then they can affect that change, and then they should believe in themselves, like believe in it. And that's another conversation that's coming up with my new team a lot, is like they are responding to like arbitrary stimulus from the company culture, and me coming in from the outside don't know these norms that like arbitrary norms that exist in the new company. And I am like, just believe in yourself, like go do it. Like your ideas are exactly what they need to be. You go do these things that you want to go do. So I just think I think that, I don't know if it's prevalent in American culture or if it's just part of being a human anywhere in the world, but there's a lot of things that happen to us in our lives that make us believe that our existence is not valuable.
Absolutely. And I have a question for y'all for that, because that's extremely powerful thing that you shared is, do you think that, because what I took away just, and I've been led by you, and one thing that I know is a signature trademark. If I had to pick one
I'm
thing
really
from you,
scared about what you're about to say.
no, it's going to be positive, is empowerment. And that's what it sounded like. It's like people just don't feel empowered.
Yeah.
And you talking about your upbringing, you felt like you kind of felt the same. You didn't feel empowered. Where do you feel like you learned that? Do you think it was by becoming a parent and wanting your kids to not feel how you felt, or did you think you learned it through, professionally? Was it a mixture of both? Where do you think that came from? That kind of light bulb moment for you?
Well, when my first kid was born, that was a pivotal moment in my life, and definitely like just turned on a dime. Like my life just changed immediately. And so I knew I wanted it for her and for my other kids. I knew like I didn't know how to do it for myself, but I knew that I wanted it for them. So I always like tried to show up for them in a way that would allow them to be that way. And also, make them work through some tough stuff as well,
For
and
sure.
be resilient at the same time. But for the light bulb moment for me, and I don't know, like there's nothing magical here, is I think that after 15 years of seeing other people screw it up, I was like, they don't know what they're doing. Like I was like, there were some people like that, but most people I think were just tuned out or didn't care, like just didn't have the capability, never learned, or like
Right.
whatever. Yeah, like everybody else was just messing it up. And I was like, and then I think when you started, we always tease you about how young you are or were, I don't know. But then when you started working for me, I was like, oh, this guy's early in his career. Like, don't let it so that he has to go as long as I do to learn that lesson. Like, I seem to recall we've talked about that. Like, other people don't know what they're doing, right? You know better than they do.
We talked
And
about that a lot.
yeah. And I think that's just the reality of the world too. Even
Yeah.
now, as the whole cliche about being a parent or growing up, like you don't know what you're doing. You still don't know you don't have it figured out.
No clue. Zero clue. And I just wanna for the audience, like, when John says like you don't know what you're doing, just know that he's not calling you out or picking on you. It's the fact that it's like there's gonna be a good chance, like we all, at least I feel this way, so I'll talk for myself. I'm in a constant state of like, do I really know what the fuck I'm doing right now? Because, and I gotta check myself all the time, because like I feel like when I check myself 70% of the time, unless it's like parenting and being a husband, I'm still pretty bad. I would self-reflect and like I could be way better, and I'm working on that. But in a work sense, I'm like, 70% of the time I feel like I'm okay.
Yeah.
But there's just times where I'm completely out of pocket. I'm like, what the fuck am I thinking, man?
Yeah, I mean, I would put like you're out of pocket a lot, way
Yeah.
more than you should be.
All right. So maybe it was 70-30 the other way. And
But I think you hit
trying
on
to
a
save
good
myself.
point though. Like there's a good insight in there because number one, I am calling some of you out. Like some of you don't know what you're doing. But yeah, mostly what
Name
you said
drop.
meant is
Name drop.
I will not. You won't even compliment your dad on this podcast, and I'm not going to name.
Don't do that. Don't do that. It's Father's Day coming up. Love you, Dad. Don't do that.
But so let me refine what I just said based on what you said. I would say that there's some people that uh think they know what they're doing, or they believe they know what they're doing, but they don't. And I would say
Mm.
a lot of people fall into that bucket. But I think like some of the really special people are the people that don't know what they're doing and realize they don't know what they're doing. And if you have that and you realize that moment, then it unlocks so much else in your ability to influence, in your ability to navigate situations when you realize that thing. Like you don't know what you're doing and you're aware of that. Changes your world approach.
I think you just described something that we've talked on the show about, which is like the four quadrants of knowing, is it called? But like a lot of people are unconsciously incompetent
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you
yeah.
have
We talked
no
about this.
clue.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'll end
you
it.
don't even know that you're incompetent.
Right. And then what you
Yeah,
just described was a space of conscious incompetence, which is
exactly.
where growth is really unlocked, because you're like, hey, I know that I don't know this. So now the next step is, what am I going to do about
Yeah.
knowing that I don't know this?
But that's
If
only the
that's
second
where
level too. You're still
that's
got
the
two more
crazy
levels to.
shit. Well,
Yeah.
if that's where it ended, then there would be a problem, because it'd be like, wait a minute, I know I'm doing something wrong, but I don't. So there's two things: either I don't have the support to go and fix it, which, and for some people that's the case, right? Not everybody's in supportive spots, but at least the place that I work at, especially when I was in stores, it was the other thing where it's like, you're not doing this right and you don't give a fuck. And so
Yeah.
at that point, it's a will problem. And now I got beef with you because you're
Yeah.
purposely not doing it. So
I think that, I'm going to make a broad generalization here and probably like,
do it.
I'll eat my words here in a little bit, but I would say that self-awareness, like deep self-awareness is maybe the most important skill to navigating the world and also making the world a better place. Because I think that so much of like what happens in our society, regardless of your political spectrum, is like people lack self-awareness. I see so often, and I'm sure that I do this too. I'm probably guilty, but we don't act in a way that aligns with what we state our beliefs are. Like we will say that these are our beliefs, but then when it comes to take action, we do something completely different. And most people don't even compute that that happened. And then when they're faced with it, they won't even take accountability for it. They'll explain it away somehow. And I think that's like a real epidemic. And I think that
Mm.
I mean we could go into I don't even know if I want to go down this rabbit hole, but just the impact of social media and everything on that, like we need to be better at self-awareness. And that's
It's
something I
true.
would evangelize.
So this could go like 500 different ways, but I do agree with you though. I agree with you that there was one of the very first pieces of merch that we ran was a white sweater with red text, and it said live what you speak.
Oh yeah.
Now that sounds fantastic, right? It comes off the tongue real nice too. Like I just made that up, by the way. That's trademarked. Live what you speak. But
It's like
it's
walk the walk, but
right, it's
but
way
like in
harder
old
in
English or
practice.
something.
Yeah. You don't
It's like
think that live what you
fancy.
speak
It's
You don't think
yeah,
that
it's
live
like
what you speak is up to the times? What is that, like ye old English? Like I think that's all right.
well no, it's fine. I'm just saying like
I didn't
it's
say live what thee speak. You know what I mean? Like,
live what ye speak.
well, yeah, whatever how you would say it. But yeah, walk the walk, I guess, is a good way to say it. That seems too genericized.
Well, no, yeah, I like the way that you did it. I was just giving you a hard time, and I
That's okay.
completely derailed you. You didn't even know what you were
No,
going
you
to say
didn't.
anymore.
No, you
Oh,
didn't. I
okay.
know exactly what I'm saying. Because it's something that I try to model and it became real just like you, right? When you have your first child. a switch just flips in you,
Yeah.
and no clue where it comes from, where it happens. Maybe it's the reality of like, oh shit, this is real, and I want to be present for my child, and I want to give them everything that I have. But one of the best things that I can model for my child is if I say I'm going to do something, then let them see me do whatever I say, because
Yeah.
that's what I would expect them to do when they become adults. Not even I expect them to do that now, because one thing I've learned is that your value as a person is really in how trustworthy your word is.
Hmm.
Like
For sure.
I don't care how much money you have. If you're speaking nice and then I see you go do something different, you lose all credibility in my.
So do you think that for that moment of childbirth, what I observe is I don't think a flip or a switch flips for everyone. Like, and I've always wondered about that. Like, obviously, the moment of a child being born, whether you're the father or the mother or whatever, like it affects everybody so differently. And it seems like it should just be like
Yeah.
this thing, but it's very different for everyone.
Yeah, I can't explain it
I can't either.
why why it would be different, but I have this conversation sometimes. I talk about it with my wife. I think I've talked about it on the show a little bit. I even spoke about it with my parents, which is there's a certain pressure that I feel, and it's not an unhealthy one, it's not a bad one, but it's I saw what a generation before me went through to get to where they're at, and they had to pave the way, right? Because they didn't really have the best example set before them. And so I have no excuse to not be successful because they were able to take nothing and make something out of it. And now I have something, and I got a way better starting point. The analogy my dad always likes to use is picture a Monopoly game, right? Monopoly games take forever. But the goal is that there's some people in life that are able to show up to the Monopoly game right when it starts, right?
Hmm.
So they start with the
Get themselves
200
on the board.
bucks, right?
Yeah.
They start with 200 bucks, they start at go. And then there's a majority of people that come to the game late, but you're still dealt the same 200 bucks and you start at go when people got houses and hotels and all that stuff. And so the goal of each generation is to get next generation to be able to start closer to the beginning of that game. How could we do it? And so I
Yeah.
feel that pressure, but I tell people like it's a privilege to be able to feel this pressure because my parents didn't have the same privilege to feel this pressure. And it
Yeah.
and so I'm able to start ahead of time. Now what I do it is up to me, but um, when I held my son for the first time, I was like, the first thing that went through my head was holy shit. That was no lie. I'm like, number one, I was overwhelmed with emotion, but it was like, what the fuck did I do? Like this shit is real. And
Yeah.
then after that was like, how do I set things up so that he could be in a better position than I was? And
Yeah.
that's what every move has been moving forward. Is how can they take what we've done, take what I've done, and then just make it better, build upon that so that his kid can start even sooner. And then eventually we'll just be there at the start.
Yeah. Um, I remember being terrified leading up to the birth of my first child. And like, I was like, I don't want this. I'm not ready for this. Like, but then I had this, like, there's this very vivid moment that everybody in my life knows this story about, you know, uh, she was born early in the morning, like 1:08 a.m. or something. And so we're all exhausted, and her mom and I like go to sleep, and I remember it was like 6 o'clock in the morning and she starts crying and she's there in the room with us, and I get up with her to like comfort her, and I don't know how to comfort a baby. But I pick her up and like the lights streaming in through the blinds at the hospital window, and then I'm just holding her, and that was my moment. Like that moment was like I just broke down, and I don't really cry. Like emotions usually aren't available to me, but like that was it, and that was the moment that like everything in my world changed. Which it sounds like so cliche and dumb, but it's so true. And then you say it back to people that don't have kids, and you're like, your life's going to change, and they're like, whatever, but it does. But I
Yeah.
think, the thing that gives me a lot of anxiety, way more than maybe it should, is that whole legacy thing that you're talking about, Um, like I think about that concept that you talked about of, starting further on the board with every generation. And I feel that same way. Like I want to it's a privilege to me and an honor to be able to give my kids a further start in life, and I very much aim for that. And if I can help them with their grandkids do the same thing, and I have enough wealth to do that, then I want to do that. But like, what do you think is the family with this and like longest consecutive streak of generations improving? Like I feel like three is maybe the limit, and not from like even from a financial wealth perspective, but like from a happiness and fulfillment and connection, like family connection, which is really what's important. It feels like more than three generations and you can't maintain that.
So I think there's definitely cultures and societies that do it better in the world. Maybe more in like the Asian communities where families and generations live with each other.
Hmm.
Because I think it's so easy, especially in American culture, right? Like, and my parents weren't like this, but you see it a lot. Like, you turn 18, you go to college, you go far away from college, and then who knows, you either stay where you went to school at because you found a job there, your partner there, and you put down roots somewhere, and you see your parents twice, three times a year if you're lucky, and then that's really it. But the next generation doesn't really get to see or have an appreciation of even where their own parents came from. Like, I remember this one time. So my dad grew up in the South Bronx, late 70s, early 80s. Right, they moved from New York in the 90s, and I remember we went back because I believe it was visiting my great grandmother before she had passed. She still lived in the same neighborhood or close to it. And I remember it was me and my brothers. We were in the back of the car, my parents in the front, and they were just amazed by how the neighborhood had changed. And my dad's like, "Wow, look at that." My mom's like, "Whoa, look at that!" Like, and we're just like, "What? They're celebrating this? What?"
Yeah.
We're like, "What?" But if I don't know if I didn't have a moment like that, I wouldn't have been able to appreciate. Like, they always say, like, other cities seem more attracting than where you grew up at because it's something different and new. So I didn't have the same feeling about how I feel about my city now. Like, before, I wouldn't have this big poster up there that says Norwich on there where I'm from. But after a moment like that, I'm like, man, like, Norwich is actually pretty good. And so that's why
Yeah,
it's so
no.
important for me to take my kids back there. Of course, I want the interaction with my family, but also, like, this is how dad grew up. And then they get to build a relationship with my parents, and they figure out that's how their grandparents grew up, because it keeps you close to the source. And also taking them to the Philippines and seeing how my wife, even though my wife had it pretty nice, but seeing what it's like over there, to understand, like, no matter how far you got, the person who had nothing is in your timeline, is in your family tree. And because of that person who had nothing made a decision to get picked to get up and do something about it, that's why you exist right now. And but I agree with you. I think it's, especially in American culture, it gets lost so fast because we don't appreciate our elders. People have big risks with their parents, and it could be for whatever reasons. But
Yeah.
you don't get to you don't appreciate the family history maybe as much as you should. And then you end up
Well, I don't.
repeating it.
Yeah, but also there's those like the conundrums for me of the people that aren't like they're breaking the cycle in a negative way, like how does that happen and why does that happen? Um and I think my biggest fear in life and maybe the biggest measure of my success as a person is will will my kids want to continue to come home, and will my grandkids um, feel connected? And have I done enough to make my children feel like this is home? And I don't think like, and obviously my wife and I both contribute to that, but I don't think she doubts herself. Like she's just like, of course they will. And
She's a
so,
baller.
well,
That's
yeah,
great.
exactly.
You
She's
need that confidence.
Well, exactly. I think that's totally one of the reasons that I married her, because I saw that. I was like, this is something I am not good at, and she's very good at, and I need her to show me the way. Like, and there were many times in our marriage where I had to like give my faith to her that this was the way to do something that was very uncomfortable for me, but was the thing that was right for like the family being together, Yeah. But I just like, yeah, if I didn't work and I had a whole bunch of money, I would probably spend a bunch of time investigating and researching those families that like how that happens, where you've got successive generations where it seems like everything's going really good. And then there's like one person that turns that. And did that happen because of an experience in that person's life that changed it? Or is it just genetic? Like some people just born with different ways of seeing and approaching the world, and regardless of whether or not they lived in a great and nurturing, caring, protected, safe environment, just because of the way they are, like they're gonna while out, as Matt would say.
Well, I wild out, but
As while out, can you even say while out? It doesn't have to be like you're whiling. I don't know.
nah, there's a song, Wild Out. You should go listen to it. I think you'll
I
enjoy it. But
look at.
I so I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I don't know, but I think one thing, and you can let me know how you feel about this, of course, is
Oh, I will.
there's so experiences play a big part. And I'm sure that everybody has an experience with their parents where they're completely disagreed with them, how they handled the situation, how they parented you. So whether it's they disciplined you for something or whatever it could be. And so some people go into things and they're like, I'm gonna do not do what my parents did. And I'm not saying that's the right thing or the wrong thing, but just like how you don't know anything, you have to understand they didn't know anything. And just because it didn't work for you doesn't mean it's not what's going to work for your child. So I think that's the tough part about parenting. Now, I don't have anything against my parents. In fact, I think I had the right parents for me, and what they did is what they needed to. And I probably could have gotten beat more than I did. I probably earned it
This
more, to be honest with you.
so wish I'm watching this through your dad's eyes right now. Like what
Listen, but I didn't fully come to that understanding, or to that place until I became a dad myself and realized, like, wait a minute, I got parents that know stuff. Like, I feel like I came out okay, and they raised me, but yet I still feel like I know absolutely nothing, even though I saw what I feel to be A plus behavior play out in front of me on my entire life. But yet I still find myself like, what am I supposed to do in this situation, even though I had the example in front of me? It's like cheating on a test and still failing. You got the answer key right there, but you're still failing. And so I'm like, dang, you gotta cut them some slack, because the same place where you were, where you knew nothing. Now, granted, you might have made a different decision because of what you experienced, but that's how when I became a parent, a lot of things started making sense, to kind of put a bow on that. And I was like, dang, I gave my parents way too much grief, way too
yeah.
much.
Yeah, it certainly puts perspective on it all. Certainly, because being a parent is very hard.
And my oldest,
So
my oldest child is only 4. I'm sure once he becomes 13, I'm gonna feel like even bigger piece of shit. Stay tuned in 9 years.
I don't, well, I mean, like you said, like you shouldn't even you feel however you want, but it seems contradictory to feel like you're not doing something right, you know?
I just think it's like you think you know better, and then you gain wisdom, and you're like, yeah, I know nothing. But you made these decisions based off thinking you knew something, and it hurt people. I did this thing. I forgot what it's for. I think it was like you ever heard of 4-H, the 4-H's or whatever? It's like like a team building activity. I think we did it.
We might
Didn't we
have.
do it when we went to Colorado?
Yeah, I think
I
we
think,
did do that. Yeah.
and we talked about like a heartbreak or whatever. And I was like, I talked about my wife's postpartum. That was one. But I was like, the other heartbreak is that making decisions, selfish decisions that hurt people that I cared, that I said I loved. Because through my decisions, if I loved them, why would I do that? But I was like, the biggest benefit of that is now I get the opportunity to humble myself and go ask for forgiveness. And so I feel like this stage in my life is like a lot of eating crow,
Mm.
because I'm like, damn, they were right. Damn. Now it helps that I'm like on the other side of the country, so I don't like see them face to face as much anymore.
Yeah, it
But
feels like
listen,
there's some stuff to unpack there.
I mean, listen, my parents were right 99.99999% of the time,
It
and
just took you 27 or 28 years to get there.
almost 29.
Oh man.
So I did want to kind of go back to what we talked about, I think, at the top of the show when I was introducing you. And
Mm.
That was, and I think this ties into just parenting, growth and development in general, and we talked about people don't know that they don't know things. And I think it's because they're not they're not curious enough. And I know you feel really passionate about curiosity and how people learn, but I
Yeah.
think it's also a way how people just self-discover, because it's the
Hmm.
fire that lights you. So I'm curious, like, what do you think the correlation between curiosity and self-awareness is?
Yeah, they definitely go hand in hand. And I'm just, I think, going through that learning experience, like with corporate L&D, it's just surprising to me how often people don't even realize they should be asking a question, and then how to even form that question. And I think, I was raised in a very curious environment, and I've always just kind of taken it for granted that I know how to form a question. But I think that's one of the, like, being in learning and development with a bunch of adults. I don't think people know that. And it's really hard to teach that, like to make somebody realize that there's things happening and you could be asked, there's like a million things you could be asking a question about at any given moment. And then how to distill the important questions to ask out of those millions that you could be asking. And so I think you can teach that, but I also think so much of that is just, again, like nature, nurture, something inherent in individuals, but it's really important. I think there, like layering on that is, I do feel that like we live in a selfish society. Like we feel entitled to a lot of things.
Mm,
And all of the messaging we're sent is that it should be about, like we get to have this thing, and if we don't have this thing, then somebody out there is hurting us and against us if we don't have access to this thing. But to your point, like part of being human, I think, in living and having relationships is you're making sacrifices all of the time, and you have to figure out how to embrace that sacrifice, uh, and live with it.
mm.
I think it's just such a huge lie that we've told ourselves that it's okay to like go out into the world and be away from your family. Like 200 years ago, or I don't know how long, not long ago, I'm sure that most families stayed in the same place for generation after generation after generation, simply because of geography and transportation technology,
Yep.
and you were forced to be in the same place. But within the last, several hundred years, and I don't think that having a lot of family that lives far apart, I don't think that virtual communication is a good substitute for in-person connection.
Not at all.
And I think
Not at all.
we have to make sacrifices to stay close to each other. That is, the closeness is more important than anything else that we could get in the world. Yeah, I don't know if did that. What did you ask me?
No, I said, yeah, thanks for completely ducking the question.
Curiosity. Curiosity.
How does curiosity impact self-awareness? But I love what you said, because it brings me into another thing. When I introduced you, I'm not sure if you remember what the other word I used was, but it was the E word, and that was empathy. And you brought up people, if it's a nurture versus nature, but I really think that empathy drives curiosity, because you have to care. Like, if I don't care about something, I'm not gonna go try to find the solution to a problem. I'm not gonna be curious enough to want to go and research something or invest my time and energy into it. So I gotta care about it. And now, like, I think about kids. I'm not like the kids that I've been around. Like, you've seen three, you have three kids, right? I just want to make crystal clear. Three. I'm pretty sure it's three, right?
Mine?
Yes, three kids.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I wasn't giving you an extra one or shortchanging you one. Is kids are just naturally curious, and most kids naturally just care, right? Like, they have an attraction to their parents, so, and they care about their parents. When they see their parents, kind of like something's wrong, they might not be able to communicate it, but they could tell. And I give this example all the time. My mother-in-law passed away in 2021. My oldest sonny man, who's 4 now, he was 8 months, 9 months old, something like that. And and he was attached to me because my wife went through some postpartum stuff, and so he was always with. I was the one waking up and stuff, so he was attached to dad. So anytime I go downstairs, he'd want to come. But my wife, she had come home from work because she worked overnight, and
Mm.
she had come home from work, and obviously she was going through it. She had just lost her mom, who she was very close to, and she was gonna get some sleep. And so obviously I was gonna take our Emmanuel with me downstairs so she could get some rest. And normally whenever I would get up and open the door, he would kind of like scoot himself over to the end of the bed and go like this to pick him up. But he wouldn't leave my wife. He wouldn't leave her. He was like hugging her up, like just attached to her.
And this is
And
just one night. One night.
it was just that one moment. But I think it's because he felt like, hey, something is not right with my mom.
Yeah.
And so like that's why kids have that, even though if they can't communicate it, they have it. But I think it's to your point, what we're taught is what jades us, the
Yeah.
fend for self, and that kind of kills the empathy, and I think in turn kind of kills curiosity, because if you don't care, because if it's not about you, and you don't care, then how curious are you really going to go be to try to help somebody out or solve a problem?
Yeah. I'm not sure that I think that kids all have empathy in them. I think sometimes it's a crapshoot. And but I definitely think that your environment, like we don't, so much stimulus is sent to us to make us feel psychologically unsafe. And if we don't go get things, then we're going to be unsafe. From a curiosity perspective, like that's one of the things that's frustrating for me starting a new job is like nobody's curious about me. And I know I'm making it about myself here, but just looking at it like from the lens of, they brought in a tenured person that clearly like has expertise in a subject matter that they don't. And that's their stated reason for bringing me on, is that I have expertise in a subject they don't. Um, and nobody asks me questions. Like my assignment is to go out and ask a bunch of questions, which I believe is very important. And like you said, like I like doing that, and I like that power of the connection.
You like
But it
doing it
is
too much. Like,
maybe,
stop asking questions, please.
but I know we've been there before, but also it seems kind of weird to me that like nobody would be coming to be curious about me. I'm a person here that could provide a lot of value, but nobody wants to know about that. And, I'm finding my way, no big deal, but it's just a weird thing. And I think it has a lot to do with like work politics. People want to protect their space and feel safe and all of that. And so before they can be curious about me, I need to prove to them that like I'm not there to take something from them or whatever,
Right. Yep.
And so that's just the process we have to go through, I think. But yeah,
So you
I
think
don't know.
some kids are just assholes?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean it's not just kids; it's everybody.
But
I think.
it
Yeah,
has to be taught, though.
I don't think so.
No, and I feel like kids start learning the moment they're in the womb, because they hear your voice. That's why they know your voice when they come out. Like they look at you and like, how if you're brand new, how do you know? Because learning, you can't do something you don't know. You got to go learn it, right? Like
I mean, I don't.
you can't just hop on a bike and ride the bike. You could try, but you're gonna fall flat.
I think
So
that's totally different things that's you're going on there, though.
I think it's a
One.
skill. It's a
I don't think
skill.
so. I think it's a thing that people either do or do not do, and you can get better at it and develop it like a skill, but it starts before a skill. And like I think a corollary here is when we were fostering dogs during COVID, and I wasn't really a dog person and didn't really understand dogs, but we fostered like successively. Like one week we'd have a dog, and next week we'd have a different one, and repeatedly over and over dozens of times. And these dogs, like even the dogs that were the same breed, had wildly different personalities. And then I started to like look at the world a little differently. I think that's the same thing is true for people. Like there are, we are born with preferences, and those preferences shape our natural abilities that exist even without development. Yeah, that's what I think, man. I think that I don't. I think some of it is just inherently there.
I think everybody is born with the same muscles. It's just whatever you decide to flex, whatever you decide to exercise.
I don't think that's true. I think
I'm not talking
like,
about the people that are born with like deformities and stuff like that.
well, no, yeah, and that's what I'm not talking. I'm not talking about that either. But
But the capability is there in everybody, and it's just how much you choose to use it or not. Like I'm sure that you've seen where there's instances where I was not very empathetic, where I couldn't care less. And I'm sure that there's instances where you're like, wow, look at this Matt guy. He's really empathetic. Look how much he cares.
Yeah. And I was like, why doesn't he like that with me? Um,
Well,
but I think I think there's just some people that are capable of it and some people that are not. And I think it has to do, with however you want to decide it, like souls, or if you're more on the spiritual side, it would be how your soul is formed. If you're more on the scientific side, you'd be like how your DNA combines. But either way, I think there's minute variances in everybody that are not nature driven, or I'm sorry, not nurture driven. They are nature driven. Some people just have bad souls, Matt. And I don't think it has anything to do with how they were raised. Some people just have good souls. And again, like I've known people that have, there is this old family friend, and I think of her a lot. And my mom always tells stories about her, but she was abused by the world and just had the worst luck, like terrible luck, and constantly bad things happening to her. And some of them were her own doing, but some of them were just outrageous circumstances. And she just seemed to get a lot of it. And she had terrible circumstances growing up. She didn't have any support network, but she came out the other side. And while we knew her, she was incredibly gracious. She was humorous, kind, like always found the positive part, even when faced with successive tragedies in her life, small tragedies and big tragedies all mixed together in a blender of terror. And she found a way through it. And I think so that was just part of her nature. And her upbringing certainly wouldn't explain her ability to be like that. But I also think the reverse is true, where people are raised in a caring, loving environment, and for whatever reason, they are just like dark.
well, so here, that could be a whole another podcast episode because I think there's layers to it where it's do we know everything that our kids are doing? Because that your upbringing plays a massive part of what influences you and who you become. But there's also other pieces, right? There's especially in this age, right? The media that we consume, the friends that we keep, whether it's at school or it's after school activities, sports practices, or whatever. But I'm not going to go down the hole because that's a whole nother topic. But I think we can agree to disagree.
I think we're 50, 50 part, even into our adult life, even at a well-examined life, like 50%
Sure.
of what we do every day is out of our control and we're not even aware we're doing it. And the other 50% is intentional and we have control over. That's what I think.
How about, okay, 50-50. 50% I'm right, 50% you're wrong.
That's another, yeah, that's not. So I think if you do the math, though, if I'm saying it's 50-50 and you're saying it's 100%, then we're still at 75-25. And I can get on board with 25% nature and 75% nurture. It's probably more accurate than 50-50, honestly.
Wow, that's what you were aiming for. Well played. Right into your trap. Well done. Quick math got me. I wanted to get any final thoughts, reflections from you.
Is there anything that you think would be relevant? Like, what advice would you give me in this moment? Like, what's the one thing I should tell the world?
What's the one thing you should tell the world?
Yeah.
Come talk to me. Clearly, come ask me questions.
What do you mean by that? Like, why is that? Why is that the clear answer there?
Because you just talked about that was a point of frustration for you, is that people aren't
Oh,
coming to you and asking questions. And so it's like, come ask me questions.
yeah.
That would
Yeah.
be one. And
I think,
I
well,
think it's in both spaces. I think it's professionally, and then if you feel like it's like personally, especially as you have kids that are getting older. Like I wish I would have tapped into that more. I still can, thankfully, because my parents are still around, so I could tap into that. But you don't have to pave the road yourself. Like there you don't there's I think people think, and there's a perception that like if you had a rougher background or growing up, or you did things on your own growing up, that there's more credibility or more merit to that. There is no more like if you have a
it's
resource available to you and you are choosing not to use it, it's just dumb, is what it is. It's
well, and
dumb. And
also
there's
I
a
think
space
it's
in
a
your life where you're
complete.
supposed
You're
to be
lying to
dumb.
yourself if you think that you did do it on your own. Like you didn't.
John, I had a huge argument that I don't think it ever made the show about the self-made man. I was this, yeah. Yeah,
I
I'll
mean,
leave it at
I don't
that.
know where you land, but I don't believe in that.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah, not even. There's no
Yeah.
75-25 here.
No,
This is an
no.
absolute.
So how can you be self-made? Literally, I'm not. I mean, people. Even if you literally didn't make yourself, that's just one point right there. So just
Yeah,
throw
you
that out there.
exactly, literally. Yeah,
But
you got to
also,
think at
like,
least one person.
yeah, like you didn't feed yourself, you didn't
Yeah,
clothe yourself. Yeah, I'm just all right. I'm not
but
gonna go off on that tangent.
yeah, no, the world gets too complicated, and you can't unless you're living in a hole for your entire life. You're not self-made, And there's something to be said for hard work and
Oh,
accomplishments.
absolutely,
And it doesn't
absolutely.
just because you're not self-made, it doesn't take anything away from your hard work and your accomplishments. But I think, people should, just in the spirit of curiosity, like if anybody ever wants to come ask me questions, I would love to talk to people, and I will return the favor and ask them questions. And I think if we do that, the world will get to be a better place.
I love that. So to sign off, if people want to ask you questions, because you dropped a lot of knowledge and gems, and I love how open and vulnerable were and are. Where can they find you if you want people to come and talk to you? We'll cut this part out. Like, do not find him. Do not talk to
No,
him. He was lying the entire time.
the only social media, well, there's two social media platforms I have. One is LinkedIn, and I do like to offer career advice and whatever else. So reach out to me there if you actually want to start a conversation. The other social media platform I have is TikTok, just so I can view what my friends in the group chat send me.
John, thank you so much for coming on. I know we had to reschedule this a couple times. We won't get into why, but I appreciate your point of view, your thoughts, your emotions, your experiences, sharing them with me and the audience. And I just know, speaking from experience, the impact that you've had on me and on the people that I've worked with that were also impacted by you. And I think I can speak for all of us saying that we're better people for being able to work with you, be led by you, and know you. So thank you again so much for being on the show. Look forward to having you back if you want to come back.
Yeah.
To everybody out there, thank you for tuning in. If you reached it this far, remember, like, comment, subscribe, and as always, think critically, speak infamously. Love. Yours away.